Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another Inside Lowell podcast. I'm your host, Teddy Panos, coming to you from the WellPoint Studios here in downtown Lowell. And today, we're going to give you an inside view of yet another candidate vying to be a city councilor here in the city of Lowell. In this particular case, he is running for the District 8 seat, the Upper Highlands representative's position, currently held by John Dakota. And joining us here in the WellPoint Studios, we're excited to welcome Francisco Maldonado, not a stranger to the Lowell government scene, as we'll find out in a little bit, but a newcomer to the political scene. So welcome, Francisco.
Thank you for having me, Teddy. I'm glad to be here, and I'm looking forward to talking with you today and try to get my points across. Thanks again. It was tough finding parking, but I found some. You know what I mean? I went back to my old roots and parked by the police station. You know,
there you go.
Walked over
downtown Lowell. So we'll talk a little bit about you, your background, why you're running, and I'm gonna do my best to call you Francisco. But we've known each other for decades, and I've always called you Cisco. So
Cisco's fine.
But I want to call you by your official
Francisco,
candidate
yes,
name.
would be fine.
The same name that's on the ballot. Thank you for being here. We'll get right to the discussion with Francisco Maldonado in a quick second. Let me just thank our Inside Lowell podcast sponsors. WellPoint, we've already mentioned. We're here in the WellPoint Studios at WellPoint. Your whole health is their whole point. Thank you to Washington Savings Bank, banking that goes the extra mile. Make the switch now to Washington Savings Bank. TMI Properties, quality and value at every price point. Find your perfect space with TMI. Mahoney Oil, providing warmth and protection to Greater Lowell, Southern New Hampshire since 1925. The Greater Lowell Community Foundation, improving the quality of life here in Greater Lowell through strategic, impactful philanthropy. Francis E. Preventure Insurance, the agency people have counted on since 1982 to protect their most valuable assets. Real Estate Ray Booten, licensed realtor in Massachusetts and New Hampshire. Find him online, realestaterayBooten.com. And last but certainly not least, by the Massachusetts Pirates, bringing all the hard-hitting action and excitement of arena football to the Mill City Pirates. Next home game, Thursday, May 29th. They're on the road this weekend in northern Arizona. We've posted a game preview for you on InsideLowell.com, so head on over, check it out, and get caught up on everything going on with your Massachusetts Pirates. But for now, let's get caught up with the latest candidate to join us here in the studios. And thank you for coming. We crammed a bunch of you in, trying to get everybody in before Memorial Day, so I appreciate you coming in here. But for those who don't know, Francisco Maldonado, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you? Why are you running to become a city councilor in Lowell?
Well, my name's Francisco Maldonado. I'm a Lowellian. I was born here right on Salem Street, St. Joseph's Hospital, by two young minority newcomers to the city at 18. So I've been here all my life. I truly love the city. My family lives here. My mom lives here. My sister and brother. I started my career in, I guess, public servant with the Air Force. I went out there in the 80s. I got caught up with the economy. We had to go out and look for work because it dried up. I was DJing at the time. So I joined the Air Force. I went out to Edwards Air Force Base. I did 4 years out there. I was assigned to the test pilot school. So I was assigned with some nice projects that were top secret. One of them was the F-17 firefighter, and then the B-2 as a crew chief. I was responsible for those planes, and I had the ability to and the power to X those planes and not let them fly. For the last 6 months of my career in the Air Force. After the Air Force, I came back to Lowell. I became a police officer. I didn't think of being a police officer till 3 weeks before the academy. So I told you that when I was in the Air Force, I got there because we were looking for work, and we took all the civil service exams, and we ended up when I say we, a couple of us that hung out together, Jimmy Panoski and Kevin Gothia, we all joined the Air Force because we were all looking for work. When I was out there, they gave us a call and said, look, you're on top of the civil service exam and we have to offer you a job. So I didn't really think of being a police officer till 3 weeks before that came up. So I said, sure. I got a feeling that they had already filled that position. So I'm like, no, I'm coming down. Give me 5 days. I'll be there. I took 5 days to cross the country, went over to their training center at the time, did all the training stuff that was required, all the exams and stuff like that. And then I did that for a week. And I think a week after, I was in the academy. So it was a total of 3 weeks that I went from wanting to be an engineer, which is what I was working while I was in the Air Force. I completed my engineering degree that I started at UMass in 88. And then I did a couple of years. And again, the economy changed where I was going. Being a poor kid, you had to work and pay for your own stuff. Grew up with the generation where, you turn 18, you got to go get a job and pay to get on health insurance. So we did that. I worked at Demoulas for 8 years behind the deli. From there, like I said, came back. I've been a police officer for 29 years. I just retired March 1st and decided that I want to continue serving the public. I've been doing it for 33 years. I think I do a pretty good job. I've never abused the power that I've been given to as a police officer. My mission was always to treat people like the way I wanted to be treated. I've always believed that treat your neighbor like you would want to be treated. So, when I went out there, I treated people fairly. I treated them with empathy, respect, and integrity. You know what I mean? So now that I'm retired, I saved a little money from my quinceañero, as I tell it. We didn't have a daughter. We ended up with a dog, Diego, which is out on the campaign. My big fan. He enjoys going out walking with me. So we go out and knock on doors and try to find out what the neighborhood concerns are. And it's funny that the concerns out there are the little things that people are more concerned than the big things that we talk about in the media and stuff like that.
Interesting. A lot of different components to that background. And as I said, I've known you forever. Some of the things I didn't know. I didn't know you were a wannabe engineer. And I don't.
No, not a wannabe. I got my engineering degree.
You actually completed your degree. Yeah.
I actually wannabe, when I started at UMass, University of Lowell was when I started. And I started in 88. I actually decided I wanted to live on campus, living in the city. I actually lived on Salem Street, so it was safer to live at Leach Hall than on Salem Street. So I actually moved like 2 streets over and did the engineering for 2 years. And then obviously working full time and not having that income, things had to change for me to continue that. But thank God for the Air Force. I got to complete my degree at Southern Illinois, so I consider myself an engineer, and that was what I planned to do. We have family members that all work for Raytheon, so being, 56 back in the day, you were committed to a company. You planned to get a pension, and you were willing to give your life, to that company. Raytheon being the company that I was, working to work for. And I actually had a couple job offers on Bowen, but this police thing, well, I knew there was a pension involved, and I knew it was secure, and it wasn't a roller coaster ride. Like an engineer, you have a project and you work it, and then the moment you're done with that project, you tend to get laid off, and then you're always funding your own pension or your own 401k, which is something I didn't want. And thank God for the government and the city of Lowell, especially, for giving me a pension. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. So what in that background between kind of, you've done public service, as you mentioned, but, various other jobs as well. One thing to work for Market Basket, another thing to kind of get into the engineering field and that degree. What in that background do you think has best prepared you, and how has it prepared you to serve as a city councilor if you're elected?
Well, the last 7 years, I've been a street supervisor, a sergeant with the Lowell Police Department. So I had to manage 15 police officers and get people with different personalities, different training level, and get them to work together and accomplish a mission every day is the way I handled it. We have some officers that were stronger at one thing and others that were weaker. So as a supervisor, you got to put that component together to get the best team, especially when you go in and you have a life or death situation, and you have to go in there and make sure you're going to have the best guy up front for the situation that's at hand. So with that, and dealing, with with the people I worked for. Like I did the job for 29 years. I've never had to point my gun at anyone. I've always drew the gun out when I needed it. But I did almost point it, but Mickey O'Keefe got involved in the middle of that. Mickey O'Keefe was always a hands-on kind of person. So we had a situation. It was myself and Eric Wayne, and we were in a basement at, I think Van Greenby was the street. We had a gentleman in the domestic. He had just cut on a bunch of lines in his basement, and he had a butcher knife in his hand. And it was literally 15 feet away from me and Eric, and Sergeant O'Keefe came in. He was our supervisor. He's the one that taught me how to be a supervisor. And he came in, and he taught me that people just needed the opportunity to be heard and slows things down. He was probably the first guy that started de-escalating stuff. We've always done it. We just didn't have a name for it. You know what I mean? So Sergeant O'Keefe got involved in that situation. He got in the middle on. We could have probably used deadly force in that situation, but he was able to confront the guy. He also was a boxer, so he had skills that we didn't have, and he ended up de-escalating the guy. We arrested the guy with no use for force, deadly force, or anything like that. And yeah, that's the stuff that I bring to the table as a new candidate, is hands-on. I'm a hands-on kind of person. I've dealt with the little problems out there. I know how to solve those. I know the good and bad in Lowell,
All right. We're chatting with Francisco Maldonado, former Lowell police officer, now a candidate for City Council, District 8, the Upper Highlands District. You mentioned you've already been out knocking doors, meeting people, talking to them. You've probably been doing that your whole life. Yeah. You're not thinking you do it as a politician, but what you mentioned what they're saying to you, the little things are what matter to them. What do you see as the most important issues facing your district and by extension the city? And how does that jibe with what people are telling you are the most important issues?
I think, the big issue for us in my district is the new infrastructure that's coming into to our district. We got the Rock Bridge that's going to come over, and it's going to cause some traffic issues. Now, with that, one of the things that I run into when I'm talking to the neighbors, I call them my neighbors because they are, you know what I mean? When I go out and talk to them, they're very concerned about speeding, about traffic in their street. So I think, we need to slow things down a little and look at where we're developing, because some of that traffic is being diverted into the neighborhoods and putting people in danger, and people don't feel safe. They're seeing cars. As an accident reconstructionist, that's another thing I did, Teddy, at the Lowell Police Department. I did that for 10 years. I was considered one of the top reconstructionists in the country. I have an ACTAR certification that's very hard to get, and there's only 1,500 of them given on worldwide. So I'm proud to say I've accomplished that. I've always been good with math. So little details. As an engineer, you have tolerances that you have to keep, and that's one thing that I think I'm good at, is knowing that you have to stay within the margin of error and to make sure you do things right.
It's interesting you mentioned the speeding, because we're seeing tons of motions about speed bumps, and they're starting to pop up all over the cities. You also talked about that traffic, because it's so heavy in certain bottlenecks that it spills out into the neighborhood. And I instantly thought of, I used to automatically just go home, leaving the downtown up Dutton, Thorndike, and disappear. And then the Lord Overpass project came, and that's created some headaches to get out. So I picked my kids up on Broadway Street from school, and we cut through the Acre and ultimately Lower Highlands and Upper Highlands, your neighborhood, to get back home in Chelmsford. So we're starting to see that become more and more of an issue. Has the city grown too fast? Do you believe they're, I don't want to say either overcrowded or too many types of things that are creating these bottlenecks and overcrowding conditions?
Well, I really do believe that we need to slow things down. We really have to take a step back and look at the infrastructure that's in place now. We live in an old city, a mill city, you know what I mean? These streets weren't made for the number of cars that we have. And something, if you want your city to thrive, you got to have your community feel safe and in an environment that they're happy with. And going out right now, I'm telling you that potholes and speeding and traffic and snow removal, because we can't talk about it now because it's not a big, but I heard about snow removal issues. So, I mean, those are the things that as a district candidate, District 8, you know, who's responsible for the neighborhood and not so much at-large issues, which we also are involved with that. But, you know, I think if I'm going to be a candidate to a district, the district should get priority. And they should be the voice that we bring back to City Hall. Now, when we go to City Hall, as one of 11 councilors, I hope that we can work together. I know as a union president, when I had a board, we worked together. We brought our discussions to the table, and we discussed, and we worked and threw and brainstorming and threw everything out there and came back with a good idea that was solid.
Mm-hmm. As a former police officer, public safety, is this a safe city? You hear a lot about that.
This city is totally safe. I would never have been a cop if I didn't think it was safe. Well, look, I've heard it all. I grew up in Lowell, like I said. I grew up on Salem Street, okay? Salem Street, if anybody knows how Salem Street was in 80, I was there from like 1980 to 84. I was there, 84. So, yeah, so I had to finish high school, and I was still there, and then I joined the Air Force. So, yeah, I used to carry crates of records from Salem Street to the Smith Baker Center, where I used to have my first DJ functions where the community came together and we had events there, and I got paid, I don't know, $50, but it took like 8 hours to get all my crates down there. But that didn't stop me because, you know something, I knew I wanted out of that situation. I've been working my whole life hard to move up, all right? I came from Shaughnessy Terrace, where I had to walk to school, not like the kids today. We walked what? What's that? The old where the Butler School and Shaughnessy School are from Shaughnessy Terrace. That's probably a half-mile walk. And we did that every day. And you know something? On those walks, I learned a lot because you had to defend yourself. You know what I mean? You had Kelly Wilson chase you down, and you're a skinny 50-pound kid. You knew how to run real fast, or if not, you had to fight, and you made it home safely. But those things made you who you are, you know, today, who've made me, you know what I mean? And it's funny because I ran into Tracy Kelly after many years, and she doesn't remember that stuff, but I do. And, you know, as a police officer, she had a bad day one day, and you know something, I had the empathy to say, look, Tracy, you know, get in the back of the cruiser, let's take you home. And I got a home. Those are the things that, you know, I do personally. You know what I mean? I'm not in this for power. I had power as a police officer. You know, I don't hear anything bad about Francisco Maldonado, you know, Officer Maldonado in the city, all right? When I decided to do this, I've had officers say, you're crazy to put your name out there in your phone number and your address. No, I'm not. I didn't do anything wrong. I did my job, and I took care of my city, and I took pride in being able to go out there and treat people fairly with empathy and integrity. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I can't think of the last time a police officer has served, let alone run for office. I do remember one who thought about it maybe 15 years ago, one of your colleagues at 𝐞𝐲 Erickson, and was kind of told you can't while you're a police officer. You retired.
Yes.
And you had mentioned to me a couple of years ago, this is something you were thinking about.
Oh, no.
When you retire, you might just give politics a shot.
Yeah, you know something, I'm a person of transparency and accountability, and when you see stuff that should be more transparent, and you need to hold people accountable. There's a lot of stuff that just people do today that I grew up, like just basically contractors. Can you imagine? Like, I grew up where a handshake and your word was all you needed for a contract. Today, these guys are writing contracts and negotiating stuff. They're meeting people. They're going to their house, getting deposits, and leaving. And then they're hurting our seniors. You know what I mean? People who've worked very hard and done the right thing. There has to be some accountability for people doing the wrong things.
All right, let's talk about a couple of issues that have been hot button issues. A lot of the most recent one, and they're still talking about it. School committee meeting last night. It dominated the discussion. City council meeting on Tuesday dominated the discussion. I got a hunch the next couple of weeks, if not the next month. School funding. You're a product of Lowell Schools, by the way.
Yes.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
Does the city need to step up and give more cash to the schools, or does the school department need to learn to live within its means a little better? How do you see that issue, and how would you handle this discussion as it's been playing out?
Well, I believe that government should give a handout when people need a handout, you know what I mean, and help out. That's a role of government. Education being it, you know what I mean? We are a poor city. We have a lot of low-income people in this city. And guess what? We should be helping the public system with their finance. And I don't know what the right percentage is, because this is all new to me, but I damn would do the research and compare the percentages to other comparable cities and make sure that our education system, public school system, would get that money.
All right, let's talk about housing. A lot of folks are talking about housing. Yesterday, we had State Representative Tara Hong in here for our Daily Pulse podcast. He is your district falls in his district that he represents on Beacon Hill. Housing has been a big thing for him, and we're seeing, last year the governor and the state legislature put together a huge housing bill that ironically included the ADUs that Lowell kind of had a holy war over back in 2023. Now there's a piece of legislation called the Yes in God's Backyard, which would allow religious organizations to build, I believe, up to 50 units of housing on up to an acre of land. Where are you on the housing thing? Does the city have a housing crisis? Well, I'm going to bring up that word again. Has it overcrowded itself to the point that it does have a housing crisis? And how do we solve whatever that crisis is now?
I think housing is a national problem, right? There's a lack of housing the whole country. I mean, we just have to try to handle it the best we can responsibly. You know what I mean? I think the government, again, I believe government should help people out when they need a hand. I believe maybe subsidy are the best way to do it. I don't think you can build affordable housing today. The market is just too crazy. And I think we have a group of politicians that are in the real estate market, you know what I mean, that are making decisions that are favorable for that real estate market. And I think, that needs to go aside. We have to literally consider, you want to do affordable housing, let's make it affordable for the people that live in the city now, the taxpayers that are paying taxes now. Let's find out how can we cut government budget so that taxpayers can pay less money and still get the same services. I know if you go through that budget, there's plenty of money that can be saved.
Okay. Speaking of housing, homelessness versus vagrancy. That's an issue. Some folks, lump everything into a housing crisis and the homelessness situation. Others will say if you want some type of housing or a roof over your head, the city, the state offer enough resources to do so, and it's more of a vagrancy problem. How do you see that? How would you handle it? How would you say the current city council has handled that situation, and the city administration, I guess, as well?
Well, it's a tough thing that's going on, again, nationally. It's everywhere. Look at Boston is trying to deal with the same problems. I think in this city, I think we need to address the fact that there is a lot of crime involved with some of the homeless folks that we have in the city. Being a police officer, knowing firsthand, I personally believe that there has to be some accountability. I just said accountability being a big talking point for me. We need to hold people accountable. If you, just like as a reconstructionist, I know that if you're under the influence of alcohol and you're involved in a serious crash, there's a whole different level of accountability for that. The time that you have to spend if you're found guilty is greater. Well, I think if you're out there and you're committing crime and you're under the influence of drugs, alcohol, or drugs, we need to put these people somewhere where they can get that treatment. All right. I think you have to hold people accountable. And you know something, I've made enough death notifications as a sergeant to know if I call someone and say, hey, I picked up your son today, he's on his third strike, he's going to have to be committed for 3 years, you can visit him in jail or whatever facility, whatever we decide to do to help these people would be better than, this is Sergeant Maldonado with the Lowell Police Department. I have the duty to call you and inform you that today we found your son or daughter dead.
And too many times, officers are making those calls.
Yeah.
The budgeting, education ties back to our Lowell High School construction project. Once they figure out the school budget, we're gonna get a number sometime in June of how much extra this. I'm calling it a mess. I'll let you.
No, you know something.
How much it's going to cost. So what happened there? How did we go from 340 million from either one project or another in 2017 to 381 with the potential for 400 million plus, and the extra money here more than likely going to be borne by the Lowell taxpayer with no more help from the state or other sources? Was it an error in judgment? Was it a lack of oversight? Was it just plain bad luck?
Well, I think politics got involved in that, which determined ultimately what direction they wanted to go with that, with the city council at hand at the time. And I personally, would have loved to see the school build up on Rogers on school site with the park being there and being close to the commuter rail. But we have it downtown now, and we have to deal with that, And I think there's an opportunity to do that. There's enough land around the high school that we can bring some of those fields that we're taking kids to. I mean, let's face it. If you're a young athlete in high school and your day ends at 9 p.m. because you're being bused to a field, and you have a friend that's an athlete that is not being bused, that probably is financially a little better than you and has, private training or private, sports stuff, has a private schooling with a school that has a field next to him. That kid in high school is going to be, at a disadvantage now, because I don't believe any teenage kid, male, being one myself, is going to not figure it out that 9 o'clock is not going to let you do all the fun stuff that you other friends are doing that end their practice at 7 o'clock. You know what I mean? I don't. You know what I mean? We're stuck with it. I think there's opportunities to make it better. I think the building issues, those are stuff that should be handled by someone that has more on training in that and stuff like that. It's going to cost the taxpayers a lot of money. Somebody has to be held accountable. I mean, those decisions, we need to go track back how we ended up there and figure out, if there's any accountability, and let's not do it again. We're talking about the Smith Baker Center. That sounds like the same problem. You're redeveloping a old building, that building, I DJ'd there. I told you, I've seen the building. It's been abandoned for many friggin' years. And it's time to move on. We have to move on. Also, I think that's an opportunity for the city to put land away for a future municipal building that will house all the public service that we offer as our residents and still be centrally located. And then if you really want to talk about making a museum, well, we have a beautiful building. City Hall is a beautiful building. It needs to be revamped and treated like a historical building. And I'm not sure if we can afford that, but that would be something you can, hopefully get the federal government involved, or even the historical parks.
I just want to give you a chance to clarify. When you talked about the high school, you said, I personally would have rather seen it on Rogers. Now, not Rogers Street, off of Rogers Street. You're talking about the
Rogers school site, yeah.
The South Common site, which never really got off the ground.
No.
Some folks have mentioned.
We were trying to move it out to the Belvedere area on Rogers Street and stuff like that. All right, we got into politics, and we had a strong opposition to it, which is fine. You know what I mean? But I think we should have looked at other possibilities before we decided to put it downtown. Especially, we knew the cost that it was going to take to put it down there. Okay, we took a vibrant business out of the community, knowing downtown has no thriving businesses. A building that was, I think it was full because I parked next to it, and they always had people go in and out, and their parking was always full. So I assume that the businesses in there were making money, and paying taxes. And we took that out, and we should have looked other places. There was other opportunities, and I think if I was a councilor then, I would have worked harder to try to get a different location than downtown.
All right. Wrapping up with a couple of questions here. This one's personal for me. I think one of the biggest issues to running a campaign as a challenger is that you don't often see them differentiate themselves from their opponent all that much in local politics. You'll see it nationally and even at the state level by party. But
yeah.
What's the biggest difference between you and the person you're hoping to unseat, Councilor John Dakota, who's seeking re-election and has served since 2020? Well, you got elected in 2023.
Well, on John Dakota. So I like John. I've met him a few times. But guess what? I'm not staying in my lane when it comes to making decisions for my constituents for District 8. All right. I don't stay in lanes. If I have to move into a fast lane and get past the car in front of me, I'm going to. All right. And, that's something I will do. Also, something, I'm concerned with the little problems. I'm not going to be one that says, I'm not going to deal with the little problems, the mundane issues in the city. I'm going to deal with those. You know why City and Councilor Mercier is so popular? Because she deals with those little problems. Again, you go out there and campaign, the little problems matter. Those are the people that are going to vote for you. So guess what? If you're voting for me, those little problems, give me a call. We'll work on them. And I have a lot of connections as a street boss, I hope I can still use them.
All right. Do you have somebody who you idolize politically, or at least their style? Is there somebody who you would like to kind of pattern yourself after if you're elected and you serve?
I've never thought of being a politician till recently, right? But I never idolize anybody. If there's anybody, because I'm a little biased, it would be President Lincoln. I was born on his birthday. So, guess what? I like Lincoln. Guess what? The guy kept the Union together, and he abolished slavery. So those are two big accomplishments in history that if I had, the opportunity to meet anybody, he'd be the one I would like to meet someday. Well, maybe I will, right?
well, if you believe in the afterlife, you may get to meet him.
I don't plan to right away.
Some bad people.
Oh, stop it!
Interesting. You're the first candidate who's actually given me a specific name when I've asked that question. There is no right or wrong answer.
No, and I'm honestly about it. I'm biased because I celebrate my birthday with Lincoln every year, So February 12th,
All right, we'll remember it. If Paul Ratayem is serving on the council with you, he'll remember it on the council floor as well.
Oh my God, yes. Right. I'm looking forward to that.
So how do folks learn more about you, Francisco Maldonado, District 8 City Councilor?
Guess what? If you want to know more about me, we got a nice website, Maldonado for Lowell. Just look us up. My number, if you want to give me a call, 978-815-0114. I'm available. I'll meet up with you. The one thing I do, that's a cell phone. Would you just text me who you are and why you want to talk to me so that I can answer it? Because if it just comes across with no information, I'll probably let it go to the recording system, and then I will call you back. Again, there's a couple of things I'm doing a little different than the other candidates. I'm having a signature party on June 18th, which is the Wednesday before the federal holiday. On Thursday,
I think that's the first day that you can pull nomination papers, or if I'm not mistaken, or somewhere near there.
The
right?
11th.
The 11th. Okay.
Yeah, I had to change my vacation to Puerto Rico to come back, so I'm coming back a week earlier. I had scheduled to be out there for 2 weeks, but I decided to come back. So the 11th is when I think you pick up the nomination papers. The 18th is when the signature party. It's at Mount Pleasant from 5:30 to 9:30, whenever. I'll be there. I'll be there till everybody leaves. I'd be willing to talk politics with anyone and give you more about my story and why I wanna be your counselor. Again, I've lived in the Highlands for 27 years. I've been in the city my whole life. I'm looking forward to just representing the people. I'd like to bring back your voice from our neighborhood to City Hall and make sure you're heard, And again, those little things that are big to you are big to me, because I will bring them back to City Hall. And I'm also going to challenge our present City Hall. Guess what? I'll challenge them with some of the decisions. I'm not going to sit back and let someone tell me that there's no conflict of interest when there is a conflict of interest, and it's evident. So with that said, come to my party on June 18th and we'll talk some more.
All right, Francisco Maldonado, candidate for District 8 City Council. Thanks for joining us. Good luck out there on the campaign trail. Hoping to have you and Councilor Dakota and anyone else who may or may not get into that race between now and then come back here for some debates and forums, okay?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm trying my best. You know what I mean? This is really new to me. I suffer from dyslexia, so I work harder when it comes to public speaking. When it comes to studying, I've always had to study 10 times harder than the average person. But, that's a challenge. You just commit to it. You lock yourself in a room and you study harder, and you can do anything you want to do. So, again, Francisco Maldonado, District 8. I'd like to be your representative at City Hall. Look me up, call me, or go to my website. I also would like people to make a small donation. I don't need a lot of money. I'm going to self-fund this campaign. I've spent a lot of years saving money for quinceañero, as I say, so I'm going to use that. But I do want people to show me that they're supporting what I'm saying and they're on board with what I'm talking about.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you to Francisco Maldonado, and thank you for tuning in. Hopefully you've gotten a little bit more of an inside view of another candidate who's vying to represent you here in the city of Lowell. Thanks all of you for joining us. We'll catch you again on the other side.